it's unclear whether they'll try to go big in the outfield, or maybe just add like another platoon player in the mix. But that's definitely an area where they could improve, and just like any other team in baseball, they wouldn't hate to add another bullpen arm. They do have a lot of great arms already, but maybe one more sort of one more would really put them in good shape.
Welcome into another edition of On the Record. As always, my name is Jesse Friedman. I am your host here as we preview a very big series between the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Philadelphia Phillies this weekend. Of course, this is the NLCS rematch for the very first time in 2024. Joining me to preview this series is the one and only John Foley, who covers the Phillies for our friends over at PHLY in Philadelphia. John, thanks for hopping on. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jesse. This is a lot of fun.
So the Phillies, John, are a pretty good baseball team. They come into this series 49-25, I believe it is, among the best teams in baseball. Certainly, they have the best record in the National League. I guess my first question is just what has worked so well for the Phillies in 2024?
I think the real heart of this team has been the starting pitching, and to a little bit lesser of an extent the bullpen, but the pitching has been outstanding. For longtime fans of the Phillies, this is an interesting phenomenon. There have been years when everything's terrible, and there have been years when the offense is really good and the pitching isn't so great. But to have a team this year centered around pitching is a new experience, and they also have a lot more depth than I think the team you saw in last year's NLCS. So that's been helping them out as well. They get off to a really fast start. I'd say in the last 20, 25 games, I think they're not far above 500, but they built such a big lead in the division early on that they've been able to weather some mediocre baseball lately.
Yeah, I guess they've lost 6 out of 10 coming into this series, so maybe the Diamondbacks, I suppose, caught them at a good time here. Looking at this roster, John, it looks like by and large the Phillies brought back essentially the same team from a year ago. There's certainly some turnover here and there. I know there's a couple of guys, but not a whole lot. I guess in some ways the Phillies didn't really need to do much after what they did a year ago.
Yeah, they were in an interesting situation. After the Diamondback series, it was obviously a huge disappointment, but there weren't many places on the roster that you could point to and say this is an area we need to upgrade. I mean,
Sure.
a lot of the bats went silent, but that doesn't mean you're going to go out and replace Bryce Harper or Schwarber or Trey Turner or any of these guys. So I think what they did, they tried to focus on depth, bolster. Around the fringes of the roster, because there honestly wasn't too much else to do. I mean, the collapse against Arizona is on all of their minds, I think. But short of blowing it all up, there's not much they could really do in the offseason to address that. If your superstars are just going to chase every pitch and sort of panic, whatever happened, I don't know. I've blocked most of it out of my mind, but whatever happened there weren't a lot of easy fixes on the roster that said, here's our glaring weakness, here's what we need to go out and get. So over the offseason, Phillies president of baseball operations, Dave Dombrowski, his main priority was really re-signing Aaron Nola. They extended Zach Wheeler, so they're sort of locking guys up long term, but they didn't go out and make that big splash that I think Phillies fans have gotten used to over the past few seasons, simply because there wasn't really a lot of room to do that. They picked up Whit Merrifield as a depth piece, so some other guys here or there, but yeah, probably Merrifield was their biggest signing of the offseason, and he's been a disappointment to date, but he's got a track record that makes them think that he'll be better going forward.
You kind of alluded to this. Do you think this series has any special significance for the Phillies, or I guess for even just Phillies fans, given what happened in October?
I think for the fans, absolutely. I think fans are looking at this, and for two teams that historically had not had a lot of animosity against each other,
Yeah.
that series, as you might expect, left just a bad taste in so many Phillies fans' mouths. I would imagine there are also players on the roster who, uh, for whom the series holds special significance. Manager Rob Thompson was asked about it the other day. Is there any special meaning? He gave the response you would expect from a manager. Says no, it's just another game. But every personality in that clubhouse is different. I'm sure for some of those guys that's true, just another game. I'm sure for other guys, it's something they've been thinking about.
One of the big differences that I do notice about the Phillies this year has to do with their third baseman. It seems like Alec Boehm has taken an enormous step forward this year. I know last season in the playoffs, he was kind of planted in that cleanup spot. I kind of wondered why he was planted in that cleanup spot at times. It seemed like they maybe had other good hitters that they could have moved up there. But this year, the narrative has been very different. I mean, he's in the middle of the lineup and for a very good reason.
Yeah, he sure is having a great season. I think he's leading in all third base voting for the All Star game by a wide margin.
Hmm.
Um, and he's had a really interesting story arc in Philadelphia, from the sort of really struggling defensively over at third base. People thought he was,
Right.
too tall to be over there to get the ground balls, to really becoming, if not a plus defender, at least an average defender. He goes through his ups and downs at the plate just like everyone else, but he has been their best RBI guy for a while now. To the extent something like a clutch gene exists, he seems to have it. His numbers improve if you go from bases empty to runners in scoring position, the runners in scoring position with two outs. I think his numbers improve in each of those scenarios. He's second in the National League, just a couple RBIs behind Marcelo Ozuna for the NL lead in ribbies. And for Phillies fans, it's been he's really become a fan favorite because he's homegrown. He had the whole experience of I hate this place, and getting caught and sort of saying that he hates the ballpark after, the fans were getting on him after a 3-error game.
Hmm.
Um, but really, he's just I don't know if I've seen many more players that work harder at his craft than him, that take it seriously, sometimes to a fault. I mean,
Hmm.
you'll see him slamming bats in the dugout and cut his face a year or two ago, on a bat ricochet. So he's an intense guy. He works hard at the fielding, and seeing his improvement there has just been a delight. And he works hard in his craft hitting as well. And he's certainly not your stereotypical big power third baseman.
Sure.
If anything, he's more of the better contact guys on the team. Now, that's not to say, he's got 15 home run power, hopefully 20 home run power. Um, he's got some pop, a lot of doubles. Uh, but for the most part, his biggest attribute for this Phillies team has just been coming through in the clutch and
Hmm.
getting those runs home.
Do the Phillies need anything at the trade deadline in your mind?
Yeah, I think they really need some outfield help.
Hmm.
In my opinion, they're fourth in the majors overall in OPS.
Right.
The starting rotation is really solid. You can at least they're top four, and you could do worse than Taiwan Walker as number five. Um, but Nolo, Wheeler, Ranger Suarez having an amazing season. Christopher Sanchez, I believe, has an ERA under 3 as your number 4 starter. The starting rotation is in
Yeah.
great shape. The bullpen, they've got Alvarado, Hoffman, Matt Strom having an incredible season. Ryan Kirkering really pitching well this season. Um, and the offense has been good, fourth overall in the majors in OPS. But if you look at their production out left field, center field, and right field, I think it's like 25th, 28th, and 21st, respectively.
Interesting.
Castellanos, Castellanos and Wright. He's a streaky guy, so he can turn it on at any time. And he had 4 hits the other day, but he's really been having a tough season. Center field and left field, they've sort of been mixing and matching. Johan Rojas, who was recently sent to AAA. Brandon Marsh, who's terrific left-handed bat against righties, but hasn't had a lot of success against left-handers. And with Merrifield again, that big offseason signing that really hasn't worked out the way they had hoped. So I think that's probably the help the Phillies are looking for. Some like another outfield piece. It's unclear whether they'll try to go big in the outfield or maybe just add like another platoon player in the mix. But that's definitely an area where they could improve, and just like any other team in baseball, they wouldn't hate to add another bullpen arm. They do have a lot of great arms already, but maybe one more sort of one one more would really put them in good shape.
Looking at the pitching matchups for the series, I guess the Diamondbacks they're kind of fortunate, maybe in some ways. They're not getting Ranger Suarez, who, as you mentioned, is having just an unbelievable season in 2024. Seems to be far better than the guy that we saw in the playoffs last year. But the Diamondbacks are getting Taijuan Walker in the game on Friday. Of course, it's Zach Wheeler on Saturday. We all know about him. And then it's Christopher Sanchez in that Sunday game. I think Diamondbacks fans are pretty familiar with Wheeler at this point after seeing what he did in the playoffs. But I know Sanchez has really taken some big steps forward this year. And it seems like Walker, there maybe was some controversy over whether he should even have that rotation spot. I know Spencer Turnbull was in that spot earlier in the season. What can you tell us about those two guys?
Yeah, so Walker has been a little bit of a fan punching bag this season. Again,
Yeah.
with not too many folks to complain about on the Phillies team, that's performing really well. Um, there's just a couple of guys that fans have been after. Walker is certainly one of them. He got off to a delayed start in spring training due to him missed some time with personal issues, and then was slow to ramp up with a couple nagging injuries. His first couple regular season starts did not go well. He's sort of stabilized. He's pitching okay in his last few outings. He really stands out with the other four pitching so well
Yeah.
that
Sure.
his numbers, I think, in an ERA of 5 something when everybody else is like, hovering around 3 or below. You know, but he's not a disaster. But earlier in the season, Spencer Turnbull did have that spot while Walker was out, and he was he was pitching lights out. Now, a lot of Phillies fans say, "Well, why didn't you just leave good enough alone?" The concern there, really, from the Phillies organization was that Turnbull wasn't really. They weren't sure if he was ready for a massive leap in innings that he would have
Sure.
to take if he stayed a starter the entire season.
Hmm.
I think they were thinking, I don't know, they haven't been public about exactly what the innings max is that they have in mind for Turnbull, but it does seem that they have one. To the extent that there is an innings max, maybe you want to save those innings for later in the season,
Hmm.
starts later in the season, say if Walker goes down or proves to be completely ineffective. But the other part is Walker. He doesn't really profile well as a reliever.
Yeah.
Um, so and he's on a big contract, which we all know that plays into it as well. He's going to get more opportunities than somebody who's here on a smaller deal. So yeah, the Walker's been a little bit of a punching bag, but probably not as bad as Phillies fans will tell you. And Turnbull. He's been fantastic, but time will tell if he can really hold up under a full season's worth of innings. Because if you look at uh, his last several years, I mean, he hasn't really topped like
Sure.
100 innings. So that's sort of the story there with those two.
Friday seems like a pretty big day, in particular at Citizens Bank, given I believe Cole Hamels is having a retirement ceremony before the game. I know Citizens Bank, at least from when I was there in the playoffs, and I've seen a couple regular season games there over the years. It seems like it's always hopping in place. hop in place on a Friday night. But I imagine maybe even more so given what's happening before the game on Friday.
Yeah, Friday's going to be it's going to be a little bit of a scene. The Phillies
Hmm.
they've been selling out more games than not recently. And yeah,
Wow.
you've got a Friday night. You've got Cole Hamels' retirement ceremony, just absolutely beloved, as you might imagine, in the
Sure.
city of Philadelphia, from his 2008 World Series and the rest of his career in Philadelphia. So there's going to be a lot of emotion in the building. There's a lot of alumni in town. Um, World Series champ manager Charlie Manuel. A lot of Hamels teammates from that sort of '07 to '11 Phillies golden era.
Cool.
Um, every time one of these rolls around, they've done it with Rollins, Utley, Howard. Every time one of these rolls around, it's always a big deal. That era of Phillies baseball, those guys are just they're beloved. I mean, everybody's excited about the team now, but they're not going to be able to match the love for that previous golden era until they go out there and get a championship.
Well, I think the Phillies are on pace to win 107 games, if my math serves me correctly. So this should be a fun series. Certainly a good challenge for the Diamondbacks. 2 out of these 3 games are on national TV, with the Friday game on Apple TV Plus. I think the Sunday game is one of those new Roku broadcasts. So there should be a lot of eyes on the
Yeah,
series, and rightfully so, with this being the NLCS rematch. I'm excited, John. I'm excited to see how this goes. I've had this series circled on my calendar for basically the entire year.
yeah, it should really be a good one. Like you said, it's a NLCS rematch. And I guess the networks took notice. This is
Yeah.
it's a big one. It's a big one. It's a big one for the Phillies. They want to go out and whether they'll admit it or not. I think you want to go out and be able to go after the team that knocked you out last season. I think it's big for the Diamondbacks as well. I think
Yeah.
you all are around 500, correct? And
Yeah.
if they can come in here and take on the Phillies team that, like you said, is on pace for triple digit wins. It reminds everyone that it would remind everyone that they're a force to be reckoned with, and they're the team that knocked the Phillies out last year. With two wins in Citizens Bank Park, where the Phils were supposed to be unbeatable. So a lot of storylines in this one. It
Yeah.
should be a good time.
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much one of the greatest moments in Diamondbacks history certainly happened last time they were at Citizens Bank Park. I know Phillies fans were certainly miserable, but they've somewhat made up for it over these last few months with how well they played. So we'll see how it goes. Should be a lot of fun to watch. And John, thanks again for hopping on. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks, Jesse. Anytime, and let's see how things go. Go Phils.